U.S. President Donald Trump is reportedly reviewing how the U.S. military cooperates with Canada. Sources tell the New York Times during a February phone call, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told then Canadian Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, is at the heart of Trump's new scrutiny. For a closer look at how a U.S. walkback from NORAD affects us here, we're joined from Cobourg, Ontario by retired Major General Scott Clancy, former Director of Operations for NORAD. I am like clamping myself into my seat, Scott, because every time you and I chat, it is a new revelation and gives me something to think about. How concerned should we be over Trump reportedly, and I put in air quotes, reviewing it, or considering pulling out altogether?
This is not anything new. During the first Trump administration, those of us within the NORAD enterprise were very keen on not bringing anything pertaining to the NORAD agreement to the attention of the president at that time for these exact same fears, because if it came under scrutiny, he'd be using it as a leverage point, either in the negotiations with the USMCA, the free trade agreement, or anything else. So this is a shift. We should take it seriously, but it's a long way from ally to adversary. You know, I would hearken to, Secretary Rubio's comments, the Secretary of State, and that military cooperation with Canada is not scrapped. Now, that is nuanced, and that he did not say NORAD is fine, which should be concerning. And then the commander of NORAD was in Ottawa last week for a conference, and he spoke about affirming the NORAD strategy, and he stood strong with the Chief of Defence Staff and the Minister of Defence. But he stopped short when asked about Canada's desire to participate in the Golden Dome, about saying yes, because it's groundbreaking for Canada to go back on its long-held reticence with ballistic missile defense to want to participate. He did not even acknowledge that. So it's a shift. We should be concerned, but it's a long way from ally to adversary.
Even with this president?
Well, I say long way. That could happen quickly, perhaps, but I don't think so. And there's a few reasons why. NORAD, people say, well, it's just like ripping off a Band-Aid. It'll hurt at the beginning. No, it's not. The integration, the interconnectivity between the two nations and NORAD is like ripping off your arm. The integration of our IT and command and control systems and the command architecture. A lot of people think of 9/11 as the story like Come From Away, about how Canadians did all of these great things, which we did, to house Americans, to be good neighbors and allies. That's true. But, our story inside of NORAD or 9/11 is that the American commands in Colorado Springs and at Tyndall Air Force Base, it wasn't the Americans that were in charge of NORAD on that morning. It was the Canadians, because the American commanders happened to be out of pocket. And here in Canada, it was not Canadians that was in charge. It was the American general in Winnipeg that was in charge, because the Canadian commander was not there. And that's the level of integration, the level of, connective tissue that we would have. It'd be like ripping off our arm.
I think people feel like they understand that this has to do with security, but what I don't think they understand is the consequences. Like, what would the consequences be for Canada for this?
So I think we need to think about consequences, Anne-Marie, two ways. Okay. First of all is the consequences, because if we're talking about this, if we're tearing apart this long-standing agreement, Canada and the United States militaries are going to have to find new ways to cooperate, even though NORAD is not it. How are we going to share information? How are we going to defend North America? Because this provides an opportunity to our adversaries. If we're talking about tearing apart NORAD, we're not talking about modernizing it. We're not talking about how we're going to make sure that its defense architecture is set to defend against those threats in the future. We're talking about rolling back the clocks, and this is an opportunity for Russia and China particularly, but any illicit organization to take advantage of it. And then the other opportunity is the opportunity that provides for Canada to demonstrate exactly how we are a good ally. Look, no secret, Canada has not committed to defense significantly over the course of the last 30 years. The announcement the other day, Prime Minister Carney, of over-the-horizon radar that is going to purchase from Australia is a normal reaction, because the United States Air Force pushed off the funding and even the decisions of that funding until 2026. So Canada taking that on, that's demonstrating exactly how we're going to be a good ally. And I think the rest of our allies are looking at that.
So, when we were talking about that deal with Australia, which was to provide more security into this radar system, is that what you're saying is an example of us not looking south of the border so much and looking to expand beyond NORAD?
Well, no, I think that that is a benefit for Canada and the United States equally. So, for example, we had considered OTHR, or the over-the-horizon radar, as something that both nations would consider together. But then the United States Air Force, unilaterally, their Department of Defense, decided that they're not even going to consider funding or how they would fill that requirement until beyond 2026. It's a requirement right now. So Canada is taking that on. I think that demonstrates how we're going to be as a solid ally with the United States, but we're not going to just rely on them. We're going to be a strong partner. And this is what the kind of leadership that all Canadians, whether it's our politicians or whether it's our business leaders or even the way in which we as citizens decide to lead with our choices, this is the kind of leadership that I'm talking about.
Retired Major General Scott Clancy, former Director of Operations for NORAD. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.